If there is a pilot on this plane, any pilot at all, you need to come forward. Right now. Ethan Walker did not move. His hands rested folded on his knee. The worn leather of his jacket creaked softly as he leaned back against the seat. Around him, 200 strangers looked everywhere, except at the man they had spent the last 4 hours carefully avoiding. The woman seated beside him pulled her purse tight against her chest. A businessman across the aisle kept stealing glances at the patch on Ethan's left shoulder. And Ethan, the biker, the man everyone in this cabin had already judged and sentenced without a single word. He closed his eyes, and he whispered one word that no one else could hear. No. Now, before we go any further with this story, I want to ask you something. If you are watching this right now, do me a favor. Leave a comment below and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far Ethan's story travels tonight, because I have a feeling this one is going to go a long, long way. The trouble started before Flight 1487 ever left the gate. Ethan Walker was the last person to board that morning. Denver to Anchorage. And from the moment he stepped through that cabin door, he felt every single pair of eyes in the plane swing toward him like compass needles finding north. He was used to it. 39 years old, 6'2", blonde hair pushed back beneath a worn red bandana, a jaw that had not seen a razor in 3 days, and a black leather jacket that had logged more miles on American highways than most people in this cabin had driven in their entire lives. On his back, in bold, curved letters, the words that made every room go quiet the second he walked in. Hell's Angels. He did not blame them for staring. He had made his peace with the staring a long time ago. What he had never made peace with, what still got under his skin after all these years, was the way a room went silent the moment he entered it. Like someone had hit a mute button on the whole world. "Excuse me," he said quietly, ducking beneath the overhead bins, working his way down the narrow aisle. A man sharply pulled his elbows in. A mother slid her toddler closer to the window. Somewhere near the back of the plane, a teenager lifted his phone, and Ethan heard the soft, telltale click of a photo being taken. He did not turn around. He had learned that, too. Seat 5A, window seat. He shoved his small duffel bag into the overhead bin, settled himself into the seat, and let out a long, slow breath. The kind of breath you hold through an entire security line. The woman in 5B had been reading a magazine. The moment Ethan lowered himself into the seat beside her, she went completely still, the way a rabbit freezes when a hawk crosses the sky. Then slowly, deliberately, she reached down and lifted her purse off the floor and placed it squarely in her lap, both arms wrapped around it like a shield. Ethan saw it. Of course he saw it. He always saw it. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice low and even, "your bag is actually safer on the floor. Gets in the way of the seatbelt when it is up there like that." She did not answer. She turned herself 2 inches toward the aisle, angling her whole body away from him. Then she lifted the magazine higher, like she was building a wall between them. Ethan gave a small, quiet nod. "All right, then," he thought. "That is how this flight is going to go." He turned to the window. Outside, the ground crew was loading the last of the bags, their breath rising in white clouds in the cold Denver morning air. A de-icing truck rolled past slowly. Ordinary things, small things. Ethan focused on them, because focusing on small things was the only way he knew how to stay calm in situations like this. And staying calm had once been the only thing standing between him and death. But that was another life entirely. That was a man named Captain Walker, and Captain Walker did not exist anymore. Ethan had spent 5 years killing that man off, burying him deep and walking away from the grave without once looking back. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. It was creased at the corners, soft from being held so many times. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she had made, a stick figure on a motorcycle, and underneath the drawing, in wobbly crayon letters, My dad. Her name was Lily. She was 13 now, and she was waiting for him at the arrivals gate in Anchorage, and Ethan had made her a promise. The kind of promise you only make to a child once, and then spend the rest of your life keeping. He had promised her he would never do anything dangerous again. He tucked the photo back into his jacket, right over his heart, and closed his eyes. He did not know yet that in 90 minutes, that promise was going to be tested in a way he could never have imagined. The man in seat 4C had been watching Ethan since the moment he boarded. He was old, mid-80s, maybe older. His spine had refused to bend even as the rest of him had folded inward with age. He wore a neatly pressed wool cardigan, and pinned to his collar was a small enamel pin, the kind that most people in this cabin would never recognize. But that meant everything to the handful who would. His eyes were pale blue and terribly sharp, and they had been fixed on the biker in 5A for a very long time. Not with fear, with recognition. Interesting, the old man murmured to himself, barely above a whisper. His name was Walter Hayes. 60 years ago he had flown B-52 bombers over places that history books still argued about. His hands trembled now, and most of his hearing was gone, but one ability had never left him. The ability to spot another pilot, in any crowd. It was not the jacket. It was not the tattoos. It was something in the way the younger man had moved down that aisle. The way his eyes had swept the exit rows, counted the doors, clocked each flight attendant, all in the space of about 3 seconds, without breaking stride, without giving himself away. Civilians do not do that, Walter thought. That boy has flown something, and not just for fun. He filed the observation quietly away and said nothing. Old soldiers learned to keep their observations to themselves. But he kept one eye on seat 5A all the same. The flight attendant working the forward cabin was named Grace Okafor. She had been flying for 11 years, which meant she had learned to read a plane the way a sea captain reads the water. She could feel the mood of a cabin before the doors even closed. Could tell in the first 5 minutes whether a flight was going to be smooth or whether it was going to be 5 tense hours of someone's worst day radiating outward like heat from an oven. Flight 1487 felt tense, and Grace knew exactly why. She had watched the whole cabin recoil from the man in 5A the moment he walked through the door, and something about that tightened in her chest. Because Grace had learned over 11 years and roughly 4,000 flights that the passengers everyone was afraid of were almost never the ones who caused trouble. The trouble came from the polished ones, the men in expensive suits who believed the rules were written for other people. The quiet ones who had put away 6 drinks at the terminal bar. The rough-looking ones, the tattooed ones, the big ones who made other passengers nervous. 9 times out of 10, those were the people who helped you lift a bag into the overhead for a grandmother who could not reach. Who said, "Thank you, Mom"? Who fell asleep in 10 minutes and gave you 0 trouble from Denver to wherever. Grace made her way down the aisle doing her pre-flight check. When she reached row 5, she stopped. And she looked directly at Ethan, and she smiled. Not the professional smile, the real one. "Can I get you anything before we push back, sir? Coffee? Water?" Ethan looked up, and for just half a second something flickered across his face. Surprise. Not that she had offered, that she had looked at him, that she had said, "Sir," like she actually meant it. "Coffee would be great," he said. "Black, thank you." Row moved on. For the first time since he had boarded this plane, some of the tightness went out of his shoulders. The woman in 5B noticed the exchange. She noticed the flight attendant had smiled at the biker, and something in her expression said she did not quite understand it, and did not entirely approve. Ethan noticed her noticing. He almost said something. Almost. Then he thought of Lily. He thought of the photograph over his heart. And he remembered that the fastest way to prove every single person on this plane right about him was to open his mouth and give them a reason. So he did not. He turned back to the window. He watched the de-icing truck make another pass along the wing, and he waited for the plane to take him home. They were 40 minutes into the flight, somewhere over the vast white silence of the Yukon, when the first strange thing happened. The seatbelt sign, which had gone off smoothly after they reached cruising altitude, chimed back on. By itself, that was nothing. Turbulence, a routine precaution. Grace's calm voice came through the intercom, asking everyone to return to their seats and fasten their belts. But Ethan felt something else, something the other passengers around him could not feel, because they had not spent 10,000 hours inside aircraft learning their language. The plane's nose had come up slightly, just a degree or two, and it had stayed up. Ethan opened his eyes. He did not move his head. He did not sit up straighter. He just listened. To the engines, to the airframe, to the tiny, nearly invisible shifts in pitch and pressure that most people would never consciously register in a lifetime of flying commercial. And what he heard was an aircraft doing something a well-flown aircraft should not be doing. The nose was too high. The airspeed felt wrong. There was a heaviness in the way the plane responded to the air. A sluggishness like a car with something dragging beneath the chassis. Probably nothing, he told himself. You are not that man anymore. Let it go. He tried. 4 rows behind him, a passenger's window shade was open, and through that oval of light, if Ethan had turned to look, he would have seen the right engine trailing a thin, wavering thread of gray smoke. He did not turn to look, but he heard the change in that engine's pitch, a subtle flutter, a hesitation. And every single cell in his body that had once belonged to Captain Ethan Walker came instantly, silently, completely awake. Across the aisle, old Walter Hayes had felt it too. The old pilot's head lifted. His pale eyes found Ethan's face, and what he saw there confirmed everything. The biker was not relaxed anymore. The biker was listening. Up in the cockpit, First Officer Daniel Brooks was working very hard not to panic. He was 31 years old, 4 years with the airline, just under 3,000 flight hours. Enough to be competent, not enough to be calm when the master caution panel lit up like a Christmas tree and the captain sitting next to him said something Daniel had never once heard him say in a cockpit. That is not right. Captain Ray Mercer was 58, 30 years in the left seat. The kind of captain who had landed in every kind of weather God had ever invented and never once raised his voice about any of it. Number 2 is losing oil pressure. Fast. Confirmed. Daniel said, his own voice going tight. Oil pressure dropping. Temps climbing. Running the checklist. Daniel reached for the quick reference handbook. He was finding the tab marked Engine when Mercer suddenly went quiet in a way that made Daniel look up. The captain's face had changed. His mouth was open, no words were coming out. His left hand had lifted off the yoke and pressed flat against his own chest. Ray, Daniel said. Ray, you okay? Mercer did not answer. His eyes went wide, then unfocused. A thin sheen of sweat broke across his forehead in the span of 2 seconds, and then Captain Ray Mercer. 30 years of flying, 18,000 hours, a man who had never once raised his voice in a cockpit, made a small, broken sound, and slumped sideways against the cockpit door. Unconscious. For 1 full second, Daniel Brooks sat completely frozen, staring at his captain's slack gray face, while beside him a dying engine climbed toward the temperature at which it would begin, quite literally, to come apart. Then his training kicked in. He keyed the intercom to the cabin. He hit the call for Grace. And he grabbed the yoke with both hands as the aircraft, no longer trimmed by the man who had been flying it, began slowly and steadily to descend. In the cabin, Grace's intercom phone rang at the forward galley. The second she heard Daniel's voice, she knew. 11 years, 4,000 flights. She had never once heard a pilot sound like that. Grace, I need you up here now, and I need you to find out if there is a doctor on board and... His voice cracked, just slightly, just enough. Anybody with flight experience. Anything. Military, private, any rating at all, right now. Grace's hand tightened on the phone. Her stomach dropped in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with the aircraft descending beneath her. "Understood," she said, and her voice did not shake. Because 11 years had taught her that her voice was the last thing on this airplane that was allowed to shake. "On my way." She hung up. She took one breath, then she reached for the cabin intercom. And every passenger on Flight 1487 heard the chime. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a medical situation in the flight deck. If there is a doctor or medical professional on board, please press your call button immediately." She paused. And here, just for a heartbeat, just for one tiny moment, her voice caught. "Additionally, if there is anyone on board with piloting experience of any kind, military, commercial, or private, the flight crew is requesting your assistance. Please identify yourself to the nearest flight attendant. Thank you." The cabin, which had been murmuring nervously, went absolutely silent. Grace hung up the intercom and started down the aisle, scanning faces, moving fast. And as she walked, she watched the same thing happen that Ethan Walker had watched happen his entire adult life. People looked around. People exchanged glances. People waited for someone else to stand up. 200 people on this airplane, and not one of them moved. Ethan Walker sat perfectly still in seat 5A, staring straight ahead at the seat back in front of him, and thought, "No, not me. Not this. I made a promise." The words of the announcement were still hanging in the recycled cabin air. Anyone with piloting experience, military, commercial, private, he had all three. He had more flight hours and more emergencies than almost anyone on this plane could imagine. He had landed aircraft with structural damage. He had landed aircraft on fire. He had once brought a shot-up two-seat trainer down onto a strip of bare dirt, an instructor bleeding out in the back. No hydraulics, no second chances. And he had walked away. And that walk had cost him 3 days of not being able to sleep. And then he had Lily. And then he had a promise made in a hospital hallway on the worst night of his life. Kneeling down in front of an 8-year-old girl, taking both her small hands in his. "Baby, I'm done. No more danger. No more not coming home. I promise you, I promise." He had kept that promise for 5 years. "I cannot stand up," he thought. "If I stand up, I break it. If I break it, I might not come home. And she is 13 years old, and she has no one else." Beside him, the woman in 5B pressed her call button. Not because she was a pilot, because the plane felt wrong. Because everyone could feel that something was terribly wrong. And the silence in this cabin had turned from uncomfortable into something far darker. Ethan felt the aircraft's nose rise again. Daniel up front fighting to hold altitude with one engine dying and a captain slumped against the door. And Ethan's hands resting on his knees curled slowly into fists. Not me. Please, not me. But Walter Hayes had been watching. The old pilot unbuckled his seatbelt, a thing they had all been told not to do. And with enormous effort gripping each seat back for support, he turned himself around in seat 4C until he was facing the man in 5A. "Son," he said. Ethan did not look at him. "Son, look at me." Slowly, reluctantly, like a man being pulled towards something he had been running from for 5 years, Ethan turned his head. Walter's pale eyes held his, and when he spoke his voice was thin and cracked with age. But underneath it, there was steel. The steel of a man who had once given orders and been obeyed without question. "I watched you board this airplane," Walter said. "You counted the exits before you sat down. You clocked every door. You looked at the flight attendants and figured out which one was in charge in about a second and a half." He leaned closer. His spotted, trembling hand gripped the top of Ethan's headrest. "I flew for 31 years, son. I know what I am looking at, and I am looking at a pilot." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You are mistaken. No." Walter said it quietly, without any heat at all. "I am not, and neither are you." He nodded toward the front of the plane. "You heard that engine change 10 full minutes before that young woman made her announcement. I watched you hear it. Everybody else on this plane is scared. You are not scared, son. You are calculating, and there is a difference. And only one kind of man knows what that difference feels like. Ethan said nothing. His whole body had gone rigid. Walter's voice dropped, gentler now, almost kind. People do not lose years of training just because they stop wearing the uniform. You can put on a leather jacket. You can grow the beard. You can ride your motorcycle and tell yourself every morning that you are somebody new. But when that door opens and the plane starts to fall, the man you were is the man who is going to be sitting in that seat. A pause. That is just the truth of it. The plane dropped suddenly, a stomach-lifting jolt that ripped a cry out of a woman 2 rows back. A child began to wail. A bag came loose from somewhere near the wing and thumped to the floor. Ethan closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he saw Lily's face, gap-toothed. 8 years old. My dad in crayon. And then he saw her at 13, standing at the arrivals gate in Anchorage, waiting for a plane that, if he sat here and did nothing, might never land. And in that moment, he understood something that had been hiding underneath his promise the entire time. He had promised her he would always come home. But there were 200 people on this airplane, and every single one of them had someone waiting at some gate somewhere. 200 people with daughters and fathers and husbands and wives, and the only man on board who could give all of them a real chance to come home was sitting in seat 5A with his eyes closed. If I do not stand up, he thought, and this plane goes down, and I could have done something. How do I come home to her? How do I look at my daughter knowing I let 200 people die to keep a promise she would not even want me to keep? The answer arrived quietly, the way the most important answers always do. She would not want this. She would not want me to sit here. She would want me to be the man she drew in crayon. Ethan opened his eyes. Grace Okafor had reached row 5 on her second desperate pass down the aisle. She was about to move past when the man in the leather jacket, the man everyone had been afraid of, reached out and touched her sleeve. She stopped. He looked up at her. And the thing that struck Grace in that moment, the thing she would tell people about for the rest of her life, was that the fear was completely gone from his face. Everyone else on this airplane was drowning in it. The biker in 5A looked calm. Terribly, impossibly calm. "Ma'am," Ethan said quietly, "I can fly this airplane." Grace stared at him. Around them, heads turned. The woman in 5B lowered her magazine. The businessman across the aisle went still. The entire forward cabin seemed to hold its breath at once. "I am sorry," Grace said. Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt. The click was very loud in the silence. "I was a combat pilot," he said. "United States Air Force, 12 years. I've got more hours in more emergencies than the man up front has got hours total. No offense to him. But right now, that is what matters." He held her gaze. "Your first officer asked for anybody with flight experience. I am your anybody. Take me up front, now." For one heartbeat, Grace did the same math that every human being on this airplane had been running all day. She looked at the jacket, the beard, the patch, the tattoos climbing up his neck, and some ancient, stubborn part of her hesitated. And then 11 years and 4,000 flights spoke louder than anything else. "The polished ones cause the trouble. The rough ones help you lift the bag. Come with me," she said. Ethan stood. And 200 people watched the biker they had spent the entire flight despising rise out of seat 5A, step into the aisle, and walk, steady, unhurried, certain, toward the front of a falling airplane. The woman in 5B watched him go. Her arms were still wrapped around her purse. And as that leather jacket disappeared through the forward curtain, she looked down at her own hands, at her white knuckles, at the way she had been guarding her little bag from a man who was at this very moment walking toward the cockpit to try to save her life. Something in her face crumpled. "Oh God," she whispered to no one. "What have I?" She did not finish. Behind her, old Walter Hayes settled back into seat 4C. He buckled his belt with shaking hands. He closed his eyes, and he smiled, A small, private, deeply satisfied smile. The smile of a man who has watched one more time before the end of his life another pilot stand up when it counted. "Give him hell, son," he murmured. "Give him hell." The cockpit door opened, and Ethan Walker, biker outlaw father, ghost of a man he had spent 5 years trying to bury, took one look through that door, at the unconscious body slumped against the side wall, at the terrified young first officer white-knuckling the yoke, at the master caution panel glowing red, at the altimeter unwinding like a clock running backward, and the calm that settled over him was the deepest, most complete calm he had felt in 5 years. "First officer," he said. His voice filled the small space. "Level. Absolute. My name is Ethan Walker. I've got 12 years military time, and I have done this before. I need you to talk to me, and I need you to trust me. And between the two of us, we are going to put this airplane on the ground." You copied Daniel Brooks, 31 years old. 3,000 hours. More frightened than he had ever been in his life. He looked up at the tattooed stranger filling the cockpit doorway. The last man on earth he would have expected. And he heard something in that voice that made his own hands stop shaking. "Yeah," Daniel breathed. "Yeah, I copy. Get in here. Please get in here." Ethan stepped over the threshold. Somewhere 20,000 feet below, the frozen white ground of the Yukon reached up toward them, and the man everyone had misjudged sat down in the cockpit of a dying airplane, and for the first time in 5 years, put his hands on the controls. The cockpit door sealed shut behind him with a soft, pneumatic hiss. And just like that, Ethan Walker's entire world shrank to a space the size of a closet. "Talk to me," he said, dropping into the empty left seat. His hands found the yoke before his eyes finished sweeping the panel. "Everything fast. What do we have, number 2 engine?" Daniel said the words tumbling out. "Oil pressure went to 0 about 4 minutes ago. Temp spiked. I think it seized. I had the checklist open when the captain, he grabbed his chest. And he went down. I couldn't do the engine checklist and hold the airplane and check on him all at the same." "You did fine," Ethan said. "You held the airplane. That is the only job that mattered in that moment, and you did it. Look at me." Daniel looked at him. "You are not alone anymore," Ethan said. Something in the younger man's chest unlocked. "Copy," Daniel said. "Good. Now, number 2, shut it down. Full shutdown right now, before it comes apart and takes the wing with it. You know the memory items." "Yeah?" "Then do them. I have got the airplane. You run the shutdown. Go." "You have got the airplane," Daniel repeated. He let go of the yoke, and Ethan felt the full weight of the crippled jet transfer into his hands. And in that first second of contact, everything Ethan had told himself for 5 years, that he was done, that he was somebody new, that the pilot in him was dead and buried, it came apart like wet paper. The airplane spoke to him through his palms. It was sick. It was dragging. It wanted to roll right toward the dead engine. It wanted to sink. It was fighting him for the nose. But it was flying. It was still flying. "I have flown worse than this," he thought. "I have flown worse than this on fire." The emergency checklist ran. The engine shut down. No fire. No firelight, just one engine left and a flying airplane and 20,000 feet of clean Alaskan air beneath them. Then Ethan glanced at the captain. "Is he breathing?" Daniel looked. His face went slack with dread. "I cannot tell from here." Ethan keyed the interphone. "Grace, are you there?" "Right outside the door." "I need 2 things, and I need them right now. 1, get me that doctor if you found one. Get him into this cockpit for the captain. 2, prep that cabin for a possible emergency landing. Not a drill, soon, but I want them ready." "Can you do that?" "The doctor is already standing by, and the cabin has been braced and ready since the captain went down." A pause. "Sir, who am I talking to right now?" Ethan almost smiled. "You are talking to the biker from 5A, ma'am." The smallest silence on the line, then, "Copy 5A. Bring us home." The line clicked off, and in the cockpit, Daniel Brooks noticed something. The stone of terror that had been sitting in his own chest since Ray Mercer collapsed had shrunk just enough for him to breathe around it. Because the man in the leather jacket was not panicking. The man in the leather jacket was making a plan. "Okay," Ethan said. "First priority. Where are we and where are we going? Pull up the nearest suitable field. Talk to me about weather, runway length, everything." Daniel's fingers flew across the flight management system. "There is a regional field about 40 miles behind us, but the runway is short. 7,000 feet. Single engine into that is not ideal. What is ahead on our route, Fairbanks? Big field, long runways, but 110 miles out." Ethan ran the numbers the way he had always run them, fast, under pressure, with fuel and fear and bad options pressing in from every side. "How is our fuel?" "Good. We tankered for Anchorage. We are heavy." Then Fairbanks Ethan said, "Long runway, emergency equipment, room to be wrong if we need it. We take the extra 20 minutes. We get a field that gives us margin." He glanced at Daniel. "You agree this is your airline, your airplane, your call as much as mine. You agree, and that question, that single question from a stranger who could have simply seized command and never looked back, did something for Daniel Brooks that no pep talk could have done. Because it told him he was still a pilot. He was still part of this crew. He was not just a passenger in his own cockpit. "I agree," Daniel said, and his voice was steadier than it had been since Mercer fell. "Fairbanks, long runway. I will get the frequency and declare." "Declare it loud," Ethan said. "Mayday, not pan-pan. I want every truck they have rolling before we are on the ground. Go." Daniel keyed the radio. "Anchorage Center, this is..." He gave the flight number, and then for the first time in his career, he said the word that every pilot drills for and prays they never actually need. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. We have an engine failure number 2 shutdown and an incapacitated captain. Medical emergency in the cockpit, requesting immediate vectors and priority routing to Fairbanks. Souls on board 211. Stand by on fuel." Half a second of dead air. Then the controller came back, and to his enormous credit, his voice did not change at all. "Aircraft declaring Mayday, Anchorage Center. Roger, you are cleared direct Fairbanks. Descend and maintain as required. I am clearing the airspace in front of you right now. Say the nature of the medical emergency." "Captain is unconscious. Possible cardiac event. We have a physician passenger with him." "Copy. Emergency services will be standing by. Say your crew." A pause. "Walker, Anchorage Center. My paperwork shows 1 captain and 1 first officer. I am only seeing 2 names." Daniel looked at Ethan. Ethan picked up the radio. "Anchorage, the man flying your airplane is Ethan Walker, former United States Air Force, rated pilot, 12 years. More emergency time than I would like to talk about. I was a passenger in seat 5A until about 90 seconds ago." He let that land for exactly 1 second. "Your first officer is flying the radios and the systems. I am flying the airplane, and we are a crew. We are going to need vectors. And we need everybody on the ground to stay calm. Can you give us a clean approach into Fairbanks?" The controller, Pete Halverson, 31 years in the chair, took a breath, and then he said the thing every air traffic controller is trained never to say. He editorialized anyway. "Mr. Walker, I have got you a clean approach, and I have got the whole sky cleared out in front of you, and whoever the hell you are, welcome aboard. Let's get these people home." Ethan almost laughed. Almost. "Copy Anchorage, thank you." He handed the radio back to Daniel. Behind him, the cockpit door opened, and the doctor came in. Younger than Ethan expected, maybe 40, with the calm, exhausted eyes of someone who had worked a great many night shifts. "I am Dr. Anand," he said, already dropping to his knees beside the captain. "Emergency medicine. What happened?" Grabbed his chest. "Went unconscious 4 or 5 minutes ago." "He has not moved." Dr. Anand pressed 2 fingers to the captain's throat. His face did not change. But Ethan, who had spent a career reading faces under pressure, saw the exact half-second when the doctor found what he was looking for. And it was not good. "He has a pulse," Anand said. Weak, fast, thready. He is breathing, but it is shallow. This is a cardiac event. He needs a hospital. Not in an hour, now. Fastest I can get him to a hospital is Fairbanks, Ethan said. That is 40 minutes, maybe less if they give me some room. Can you keep him alive that long? Dr. Anand looked up at the back of the biker's head, at the leather jacket, the tattoos, the bandana, and if he felt any surprise whatsoever at who was flying this plane, he kept it to himself entirely. How long, he said. 40 minutes, maybe less if they let me push it. Then push it. I will keep him alive. You keep us in the air. Deal. Deal. And for one moment, just one complete and quiet moment, the whole cockpit found its rhythm. The doctor working the captain, the first officer working the systems, the biker working the airplane, three strangers who had never met, bound now by the only thing that mattered. 211 people who wanted to go home. Then the airplane lurched, sudden, violent, a hard yaw to the right that snapped every head in the cockpit sideways. The master caution screamed. A new light flared red on the panel, and Daniel Brooks said the two worst words a pilot can say. Oh no. Talk to me, Ethan said. Already on the rudder, already fighting the yaw. Daniel, talk to me. What is that number one? Daniel's voice had gone white. The oil pressure on number one is dropping. Our good engine, our only engine, it is dropping just like number two did. For one terrible second, the cockpit went silent except for the wail of the alarm. Two engines, the same failure, on two different engines, within 20 minutes of each other. That is not a coincidence, Ethan said. Two engines do not fail identically by accident. Daniel, what did we do before number two went? What did we change? Talk me through the last hour. Nothing. It was a normal climb. We leveled off. Everything was fuel. Ethan said it like a blade. Think about the fuel. What was the fuel doing? What did the captain do with the fuel? And Daniel Brooks, 31 years old and drowning, reached down into 3,000 hours of training and pulled up the one memory that was about to save 211 lives. He balanced the tanks. Daniel breathed. About an hour ago, Ray said the fuel was running uneven. He opened the crossfeed valve to balance it. He opened the crossfeed and he... Oh God. He never closed it. We have been feeding both engines off contaminated fuel, Ethan finished. And it all snapped into place. There is water or debris in one tank. The second the captain opened that crossfeed, it started poisoning both engines. Number two got the worst of it first. Now number one is drinking it. His hands were already moving. Close the crossfeed, isolate the tanks, feed number one off the clean side only. Which tank was it? Which side killed number two? Right tank. Daniel's hands were moving too. Number two runs off the right. The right tank is contaminated. Crossfeed closing, isolating, feeding number one off the left tank only. He stared at the gauge, and the whole cockpit stared with him. Because if the left tank was clean, they lived, and if it was not, they had about 90 seconds. The oil pressure on number one wavered, dropped another notch, held, then slowly, agonizingly, it began to climb. It is coming back, Daniel whispered. The pressure is coming back. Do not celebrate yet, Ethan said sharply. Though relief had flooded his own chest like warm water, that engine drank some bad fuel. It might be fine. And it might quit with no warning. From this second on, we fly this airplane like number one could die at any moment. Copy, Doc Ethan said without turning his head. How is the captain holding? Dr. Anand said tightly barely. Whatever you are about to do it gentle. His heart cannot take a rough ride right now. Ethan almost laughed. Dry, exhausted, gentle, he repeated. One engine, contaminated fuel, a heart attack in the jump seat. And he wants gentle. He glanced at Daniel. You hear that, First Officer? We are flying a hospital now, smooth as glass all the way down. Smooth as glass, Daniel said. And that was the moment, with the immediate crisis beaten back, with the good engine holding and the captain still alive, that Daniel Brooks finally let himself really look at the man in the left seat. at the tattoos climbing up his neck, at the worn leather, at the winged skull on his shoulder. The question that had been buried under 20 minutes of terror finally surfaced. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "You can ask me anything except to stop flying. 12 years Air Force, combat pilot, more emergency time than you want to talk about." Daniel's eyes moved over the jacket again. How does a man like that end up in the back of my airplane? And for the first time since he had sat down in this seat, Ethan's hands tightened on the yoke, and something crossed his face that Daniel could not quite read. "Long story," Ethan said. "Short version, I made a promise to my little girl 5 years ago, that I would never do anything dangerous again, that I would always come home." He kept his eyes locked on the instruments, and I kept it. 5 years, not once did I break it. A muscle worked in his jaw. Until about 6 minutes ago, when I stood up out of 5A. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Why did you break it?" Ethan thought about the woman in 5B clutching her purse, the mother sliding her toddler toward the window, the old pilot who would look through a leather jacket straight to the wings underneath. "Because she has a dad," Ethan said quietly, "and so does everybody back there. And I could not sit in that seat and let 200 people not come home just to make sure I did." He finally glanced at the younger man. "She will understand when she is older. She will understand." He said it the way a man says something he is still working on believing. Then the radio crackled, and Anchorage Center came back, and the moment closed. "Walker, Anchorage, I've got you 80 miles from Fairbanks. Weather is holding, ceiling's good, winds light and down the runway. Best news you are going to get all day." He paused. "But I've got to tell you, there is weather building to the north and moving south, and it is moving faster than the forecast said. You have got maybe 40 minutes of clear before it closes a field. You need to be on the ground inside that window." Ethan and Daniel exchanged one look. 40 minutes, Ethan said. "We can make 40 minutes, if nothing else breaks," Daniel said. "Then nothing else better break," Ethan said. And he pushed the nose down a fraction, trading altitude for speed, threading the needle between a dying engine he could not push and a storm he could not wait for. "Anchorage, copy the weather. We are coming down. Keep that runway clear and keep talking to me every step of the way." Behind the cockpit door, the 211 souls Ethan was fighting for had no idea about the contaminated fuel, or the second engine warning, or the storm racing them to Fairbanks. They knew only what Grace had told them, carefully, deliberately, not the whole truth. That there was a medical situation, that a qualified pilot was assisting, that they should stay calm and stay braced, but they could feel the airplane. They could feel it sinking, feel it yawing, feel the wrongness of it, and fear had spread through that cabin like smoke under a closed door. In row 5, the woman who had clutched her purse against the biker was crying silently, both hands pressed over her mouth. Because Grace had let one thing slip when she passed through. The man who had volunteered, the man now flying this plane, was the passenger from row 5. And the woman knew exactly which passenger that was. She knew she had pulled her bag away from him the moment he sat down. She knew she had turned her whole body away from him like he was something to be avoided, and now he was the only reason she might live. "Miss," she said, catching Grace's sleeve on her next pass through. Her voice was shaking. "The man flying the plane, the one from my row, is he really—" "He is really flying us home," Grace said gently. "Yes." The woman pressed her hand harder against her mouth. "I was so awful to him," she whispered. "I never even said a word. I just moved my bag. Like he was a— Oh God, oh God." "Ma'am?" Grace crouched down beside her, put a hand over the woman's trembling hands. "Listen to me. Whatever you are feeling right now, you fold it up and you put it away and you keep it safe. And when we are on the ground, you go find that man and you say it to his face, okay? He has earned that. And you will feel a whole lot better giving it to him than carrying it around." She squeezed her hands. "But right now, I need you calm. Because the calmer you are, the calmer the people around you stay. And calm is what is going to get us all down safe. Can you do that for me?" The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "What is his name?" she whispered. "The pilot. Do you know his name?" "Ethan," Grace said. "His name is Ethan." "Ethan," the woman repeated, like a prayer. She folded her hands in her lap, and she started silently to pray. Up front, the airplane was passing through 18,000 feet when number 1 coughed. It was a small thing, a hiccup. A single stutter in the smooth drone of the only engine keeping 211 people alive. But every man in that cockpit felt it in the pit of his stomach. Dr. Anand looked up from the captain. Daniel's hand froze over the panel, and Ethan's entire body went rigid. "No," Daniel breathed. "Watch it." Ethan's voice cut sharp. "Watch the gauges. Talk to me." The engine stuttered again. "It is the fuel." Daniel's voice was climbing. "There is still contaminated fuel in the lines from before. It is working through. If it gets into the—" "We ride it out," iron in Ethan's voice. "That engine is going to cough and sputter and scare the life out of us, but the clean fuel is feeding it now. We just have to let it clear the bad stuff out of the lines. You do not touch that engine. You do not shut it down. You let it run rough. A rough engine is a running engine. Copy." The engine coughed a third time, harder. The whole airframe shuddered. Somewhere behind the cockpit door, a passenger screamed. A child began to cry. Dr. Anand grabbed the captain to keep his head from striking the wall. And for 3 full seconds, the number 1 engine sounded like it was tearing itself apart from the inside. And then it cleared. The stutter smoothed. The drone came back, steady, full, beautiful. The pressure needle climbed and held. Daniel Brooks let out a breath that was almost a sob. "It cleared. Oh my God, it cleared. It is smooth. It is—" "See?" Ethan said, and there was the ghost of a grin underneath the exhaustion. "Rough engine is a running engine. Bad fuel is through the lines now. We should be clean the rest of the way down." He keyed the interphone. "Grace, that shudder they just felt back there was the engine clearing itself out. It is normal. Tell them it is normal. Everybody is fine. We are fine." Telling them now. A brief pause. "Ethan, the cabin can hear something in your voice. You sound like a man who has done this before. It is keeping them calm. Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." Ethan did not answer. He could not quite. Because the truth was that a man who had done this before was exactly what he was, and he had spent 5 years pretending he was not. And there was something breaking loose in his chest right now. Something he did not have time to look at. That felt almost like grief, and almost like coming home. 60 miles, Daniel said. 60 miles to Fairbanks, descending through 14,000. "How is the storm?" Daniel checked, his face tightened. "Moving faster than they said." Ethan keyed the radio. "Anchorage say weather at Fairbanks," Halverson came back. And his voice had changed. The easy confidence had thinned out. "Walker, I am not going to mislead you. That weather is ahead of schedule. Ceiling at Fairbanks is dropping. You had 40 minutes of clear. You have got maybe 20 now. Wind is picking up and it is starting to shift crosswind on you. You need to fly it like you mean it." Ethan's jaw set. 20 minutes. "Daniel, can we make Fairbanks in 20 minutes? Daniel ran the numbers. And his silence was its own answer. "It is going to be close," Daniel said. "It is going to be real close. And if the crosswind builds much more, single engine, into a shrinking weather window, with a captain who cannot take a hard landing." He looked at Ethan. "I am not going to sugarcoat it. This is the hard part. Everything up until now was easy compared to what is coming next." Ethan Walker looked out the front glass at the gray wall of weather building on the horizon, at the airport hiding somewhere behind it, at the narrowing window of clear air between him and 211 people going home. And then he did something he had not done in 5 years. He reached into his jacket, over his heart, and he pulled out the creased photograph of a gap-toothed little girl holding a crayon drawing, and he wedged it into the corner of the instrument panel, where he could see it. Lily, my dad. "What is that?" Daniel asked. "That is my reason," Ethan said. Everybody has got one. That one is mine." He put both hands back on the yoke, and his voice dropped into a register Daniel had not heard from him yet. Lower, harder, absolutely certain. The voice of a man who has looked at a bad situation and simply decided it is not going to beat him. "All right, First Officer, here is how this goes. We are going to beat that storm to the runway. We are going to fly the smoothest, cleanest single-engine approach that field has ever seen. Gentle enough that the captain's heart does not skip a beat. And we are going to put 211 people back on the ground with their families tonight." He glanced one last time at his daughter's face in the corner of the panel. "Every single one of them," he said softly, "is going to come home. Because that is the promise now. Not just me, all of them." Daniel Brooks stared at the man in the leather jacket, the biker everyone had ignored, the outlaw the whole cabin had feared, the ghost of a captain risen out of seat 5A. And he felt something in his own chest that he had not felt since Ray Mercer went down. He felt like they were going to make it. "Fairbanks in sight," Daniel said, his voice thick. "I have got the field dead ahead, through the gap in the weather. Runway is clear, trucks are rolling. They are waiting for us." "Then let us go get it," Ethan said, and he pointed the nose of the dying airplane at the narrowing seam of clear sky. One engine turning, a captain's life in the balance behind him, a storm closing in from the north, the face of his daughter watching from the corner of the panel, and began the descent. The nose came down and the airplane fell toward the clear window of sky. For the first 30 seconds it went exactly as Ethan wanted. Then the crosswind found them. It hit the tail like a shove from an open hand. The airplane slewed sideways. The nose tried to swing off the line he was drilling toward the runway. His boot came down on the rudder before his mind had finished registering the drift. "Wind is shifting on us," Daniel said. "It was down the runway 90 seconds ago. Now it's coming across, 15 knots, gusting higher." "I feel it. Anchorage," Ethan said. "What is the surface wind at Fairbanks right now?" "Give me a number. Last I've got is 270 at 18, gusting 26. That is a crosswind on your runway, Walker, right at the edge of what that airplane is certified for, and it is building." Daniel looked at Ethan, and he did not have to say the thing they were both thinking. Certified crosswind limits were written for 2 good engines, 2 healthy pilots, a calm day, a long runway. They had 1 engine, a stranger, a shaken first officer, contaminated fuel that could cough again at any second, and a captain whose heart was hanging by a thread. "That is a lot of crosswind for a single-engine approach," Daniel said quietly. "It is," Ethan agreed, and he did not lie to the kid. He had learned a long time ago that you do not lie to the man next to you when the stakes are this high. You tell him the truth. And then you tell him you are going to beat it anyway. It is a lot of crosswind, and we are going to land in it, because the alternative is turning around and flying an hour to another field with a coughing engine and a dying captain, and I am not doing that. We land here, in the crosswind." When Daniel asked quietly, it was not a challenge, it was almost a plea. He wanted to believe. He needed to. Kandahar Ethan said, "Night approach, crosswind, dust storm, and somebody shooting at the field. Compared to that, this is a Sunday drive on Route 66. He almost smiled. "The wind is the only thing trying to kill us today, Daniel. Just the wind. And the wind has never beaten me yet." That got a shaky laugh out of the younger man. Cracked and exhausted, but real. And that laugh did more good in that cockpit than any checklist ever written. Behind them, Dr. Anand had one hand braced against the sidewall and the other pressed flat against Captain Mercer's chest, feeling the fluttering, uneven rhythm beneath his palm. "How long?" he said. "Until we are down. I need a number." 12 minutes, Ethan said, "give or take." "His heart is getting worse," Anand said flatly. "I am going to be honest with both of you, because you have been honest with me. He is slipping. The rhythm is going ragged. If this landing is rough, if you slam it down, if you have to go around and try again." He stopped. "I do not think his heart survives it. You get one shot, Ethan. You understand me? There is no going around and trying again, not for him. There is no again. The words settled into the cockpit like a stone dropped into still water. One shot, no go around, single engine, building crosswind, shrinking weather window, a runway he had never flown to in an airplane he had never flown before 90 minutes ago. And now, no second chance. Ethan Walker took one long, slow breath. "Copy," he said. "One shot. I hear you, Doc." And the calm in his voice made both other men look at him, because the fear that should have been there simply was not. There was only that bottomless, terrible calm. The calm that Walter Hayes had seen and named from across an aisle. The calm of a man who had lived his entire adult life inside moments exactly like this one. Daniel, Ethan said. "New plan. We are not doing a standard approach. We cannot afford a standard approach, not with one shot. So here's what we are going to do. You are going to be my second set of eyes and my second set of hands. You call out everything, every airspeed, every altitude, every wind shift, every warning the second you see it. You do not wait for me to ask. If that engine so much as burps, you tell me. If the wind swings, you tell me. I am going to be flying this airplane with everything I have got, and I need you to be my instruments. Can you do that?" "I can do that. I know you can. You have done everything right for the last hour. Now do this one last thing right, and we all go home." Ethan's eyes locked forward on the gray mass of weather where the runway was hiding. "Get me the approach set up. Gear when I call for it and not before. Flaps in stages. I will call each one. Keep talking to Anchorage. I want that runway hours and only hours, and I want every truck they have got staged on the grass waiting for us." For the next 4 minutes, the cockpit became a single organism. 2 men breathing as one, calling and answering, the biker flying, the first officer feeding him the sky in numbers. 10 miles, copy 10. Descending through 4,000, on the glide path, 8 miles, trucks are on the grass. Anchorage confirms the runway is ours. Beautiful. Gear down, gear down. Daniel's hand hit the lever. The whole airplane groaned as the landing gear extended into the slipstream. 3 green lights blinked on, gear down and locked, flaps to approach. And it was going well. It was going so well that for about 90 seconds, Ethan let himself believe they were going to steal this one clean, that the wind was going to hold, that the engine was going to hold, that he was going to grease this crippled airplane onto that runway, and it was going to be, against every conceivable odd, easy. That was when the storm arrived. It did not build, it did not creep in from the edges. It slammed the field like a fist. The clear seam Ethan had been threading closed in an instant. The world outside the windscreen went from gray haze to nothing at all. A solid, driving wall of snow and cloud that swallowed the runway, the approach lights, the ground, everything. "I am in IMC," Ethan said sharply. "I have got no runway, nothing. Where did it go?" "It is there," Daniel said, his voice climbing but holding. "We are 4 miles out, dead on center line. You are on the instruments now, Ethan. Fly the instruments. The runway is right where it is supposed to be. You just cannot see it yet." "Anchorage," Ethan barked into the radio. "The field just went to 0. "Weather is on top of us early. Is that runway still open?" Halverson came back fast. "And grim. Walker, that squall line beat the forecast by 15 minutes. Fairbanks just went below minimums." Below minimums? Everything in the cockpit seemed to stop. Below minimums meant the weather was so severe that the rules prohibited any aircraft from attempting a landing. On a normal flight on a normal day, you turned around right now and you went somewhere else. But there was no somewhere else. There was a coughing engine, a dying captain, one shot, no go around. "Anchorage," Ethan said, very quietly, very evenly. "Is there another field I can reach anywhere with better weather that my engine and my captain can survive getting to?" A pause. He could hear Halverson working, pulling up weather data, running distances, doing the math. "No," Halverson said finally, and his voice had cracked. "No, Walker. Everything in range is the same weather system or worse. Nothing is close enough for your situation. Fairbanks is your field. Fairbanks below minimums is your field. I am sorry. I wish to God I had better news for you. And there it was, the bottom of the well. The low minimums weather, one shot, no alternate, no second chance. No way out but down through a wall of white he could not see through, onto a runway he could not see, in a crosswind at the edge of the airplane's limits, with an engine that might quit, and a captain who might die if he so much as bumped the landing. Daniel Brooks turned and looked at the man in the leather jacket. His face had gone the color of ash. "Ethan," he said, "what do we do?" For one moment, one single human moment, Ethan Walker closed his eyes. And in the darkness behind his eyelids, he was not in the cockpit anymore. He was in a hospital hallway. 5 years ago, the worst night of his life. Kneeling in front of a little girl with a gap between her front teeth, he heard his own voice making the promise. "No more danger, baby. No more not coming home. I promise you. I promise." He saw her face. He saw the crayon drawing. He felt the exact weight of the vow he had carried for 5 years. And then, in the dark, he heard something else. He heard the answer he had found back in seat 5A. The thing that had gotten him out of that chair. She would want me to be the man she drew. Ethan opened his eyes. "We fly it down," he said. "Ethan, it is below minimums. We cannot even see the—" "We fly it down," Ethan repeated, and his voice was steel. Iron. The voice of Captain Walker on the worst night of his war. "Listen to me, both of you. I have landed airplanes I could not see out of. I have flown approaches to fields that were not even supposed to exist. The runway is exactly where the instruments say it is. The instruments do not lie. I do not need to see the runway to fly to the runway. I need to trust the numbers. And I need to fly the numbers." He looked at Daniel. "But I cannot fly the instruments and watch outside at the same time. So here is the deal. I fly the instruments, you watch for the ground. The second the instant you see anything, runway approach lights, anything at all, you call it. Runway in sight. You be my eyes for the outside world, and I will fly us to the exact spot where the outside world shows up. Can you do that?" Daniel Brooks looked at the wall of white devouring the windscreen. He looked at the impossible thing this man was asking him to do. He looked at the absolute, unshakable calm in the biker's face. And he made a decision he would be proud of for the rest of his life. He decided to trust him. "Runway in sight," Daniel said. "The second I see it, I have got you. Anchorage," Ethan said into the radio. "We are landing at Fairbanks, below minimums or not. It is the only shot my captain has got, and it is the only field my engine can make. Roll every truck you have. Say a prayer. We are coming down." A silence on the frequency, and then Pete Halverson, 31 years in the chair, did the only thing left to do. "Fairbanks is all yours, Walker. Winds 270 at 20, gusting 28. Every truck is rolling. And Ethan? Bring them home. Bring them all home." "That is the plan," Ethan said. He pressed the photograph of his daughter deeper into the corner of the panel. He wrapped both hands around the yoke, and he began to fly the numbers. 3 miles, Daniel called. "On glide path. On center line. Speed is good. Flaps full. Flaps full. Speed checks. Configured to land. 2 miles. Descending through 800 feet. Crosswind from the left. Gusting. I feel it." And Ethan did feel it. He had crabbed the nose into the wind, pointing the airplane slightly off the runway heading, so the crosswind would not blow them sideways. Flying a diagonal line toward an invisible runway. Trusting the numbers. Trusting 12 years and 10,000 hours and every terrible night that had made him who he was. 1 mile. 500 feet. Behind him, Dr. Anand had stopped talking. He had both hands on the captain now. His eyes were closed. His lips were moving. And he was, for the first time in a long while, praying. 400 feet. Nothing but white outside the glass. 300 feet. Nothing. 200 feet. "Ethan, I have got nothing. I cannot see. Keep looking," Ethan said. "Dead calm. It is there. Keep looking." 150. And Ethan Walker felt the whole weight of it pressed down on him at once. The 211 souls, the dying captain, the daughter waiting in anchorage, the promise, the storm, the one shot. And he did not flinch, and he did not blink, and he held the crippled airplane rock steady on the numbers as the ground rushed up unseen beneath them. And in the deepest, coldest, calmest part of himself, he thought one clear thought. Come on, show me the runway. 100 feet, and then Daniel Brooks screamed the two most beautiful words in the English language. Runway in sight! Runway dead ahead! We are on it! We are right on the center line, Ethan. We are on it. The wall of white tore open, and there it was, the runway, its lights blazing up through the driving snow, sitting exactly, precisely, impossibly where the instruments had promised it would be, dead ahead. Close, rushing up fast and real. I have got it, Ethan said, and every single ounce of him came alive at once. The crab coming out, the wing dropping into the wind, the rudder straightening the nose, all of it in one fluid motion that no checklist could ever teach, that only 10,000 hours could put into a man's hands. The airplane came down through the last 100 feet in the screaming crosswind, one engine turning, a captain's life in the balance, a little girl's face watching from the corner of the panel. And the wheels touched the runway. They touched so softly that for half a second nobody in the cockpit believed it had happened. So gentle that Dr. Anand, his hand still pressed to the captain's chest, felt the touchdown is nothing more than a whisper, a settling of weight onto wheels, the kind of landing that a healthy heart would not have even noticed, and a failing one could survive. We are down, Daniel breathed. Oh my God. We are down. We are down. Not yet, we are not, Ethan said, standing on the brakes, feeding in rudder, fighting the crosswind, still trying to push them off the center line. Not until we stop. Keep me on the line, talk to me. Center line is good. You are tracking straight. Brakes are working. We are slowing. The airplane thundered down the runway through the snow, decelerating, the engine roar dying back. The whole enormous, crippled machine coming under control. Slower, slower, until at last, at the far end of the runway, in the middle of the storm, with the red and blue lights of a dozen emergency trucks flashing all around them through the white, Flight 1487 rolled to a full and complete stop, and the cockpit went silent. None of the three men could speak. Then Dr. Anand said in a voice full of wonder, "His heart is still going. That landing, I never even felt it touch down. His heart never skipped once. You did it. You actually did it." Daniel Brooks put his face in his hands, and the sound he made was half laugh and half sob. And Ethan Walker sat in the captain's seat with his hands still on the controls, staring out at the flashing lights in the snow, and slowly, slowly, he let go of the yoke. His hands were not shaking. He reached up and took the photograph of his daughter off the instrument panel, and he looked at it for a long, quiet moment. The gap-toothed grin, the crayon letters. My dad. I came home, he said softly. To her, to himself, to the ghost of the man he had tried for 5 years to bury. I broke the promise. And I still came home. And I brought everybody else home too. He pressed the photo to his lips for just a second, then tucked it back into his jacket, over his heart. The interphone crackled. Grace Okafor's voice came through, and it was thick with everything she had been holding back for the last 90 minutes. For 211 people. Flight deck, she said. Did we? We are down, Grace, Ethan said. We are stopped. Everybody is safe. Get your doors ready. We have got trucks all around us. They are going to want the captain first. A pause. And then on the other side of that door, in the cabin of Flight 1487, Grace Okafor turned to face 211 passengers who had spent the last 90 minutes in the most terrifying silence of their lives. And she keyed the cabin PA, and she said in a voice that broke on the second word, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are safely on the ground at Fairbanks." And the cabin erupted. It was a sound Ethan could hear through the sealed cockpit door. A roar. A wall of it, cheering and weeping and shouting all at once, the high, thin wail of children who did not understand why all the grown-ups were crying. And under all of it, somewhere in row 5, a woman who had clutched her purse against a stranger was sobbing into her hands, saying a name over and over. Ethan. 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 In the cockpit, Daniel Brooks lowered his hands from his face and turned to the man in a leather jacket. The biker everyone had ignored. The outlaw the whole plane had feared. The ghost who had risen out of seat 5A. And Daniel found that he did not have any words big enough, so he just held out his hand. Ethan looked at it. Then he took it. "Thank you," Daniel said. It came out cracked, barely a whisper. There are not. Thank you. You saved every single one of us." "We saved them," Ethan said. "You and me and the doc. Nobody does this alone, kid. Nobody ever did." He gripped the young man's hand hard. "You flew this airplane for the worst 4 minutes of your life before I ever got up here. And you never let it fall. Don't you ever forget that. You are a good pilot, Daniel Brooks. You are a damn good pilot." Daniel could not answer. He just nodded, his jaw working, his eyes streaming. Outside, the emergency crews were already swarming the aircraft. The door was already opening. The storm was still howling. And somewhere in the flashing lights, a paramedic was climbing aboard to take Captain Ray Mercer to a hospital that would in the end save his life. Because a biker in seat 5A had put an airplane down so gently that a failing heart never felt it land. The paramedics came first. They came through the forward door before the jetway was even fully locked. 2 of them with a gurney moving fast and quiet. The way emergency people move when they know the clock is running. Ethan stepped back and let them pass without a word. They had Captain Mercer strapped and moving in under 90 seconds. At the door, Mercer's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. He looked up at the ceiling of the airplane he had flown for 30 years. At the faces around him. And then his eyes found Ethan. The leather jacket, the tattoos, the face of a man he had never met. Something moved in the captain's expression. Confusion first, then slowly, something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. Like the part of him that was still a pilot understood even through the fog of a heart attack exactly what had happened. "Did you?" Mercer's voice was barely a breath. "Did somebody land my airplane?" Ethan crouched down beside the gurney so the old captain did not have to raise his voice. "Yes, sir," he said it simply. "Everybody is safe. All 211. Mercer closed his eyes, and the faintest, most exhausted smile crossed his gray face. "Good," he managed. "Good landing, smooth as glass," Ethan said, and meant it. "Good," Mercer said again, and let the paramedics carry him away. Ethan stood and watched him go, and something tightened in his chest that he did not have a name for. It was not grief, and it was not relief. It was something in between. The particular ache of one pilot watching another be carried off his own airplane, knowing that the landing you are most proud of is one the other man will never remember making. Then Grace Okafor touched his arm. She had been standing behind him this whole time. When he turned, he saw that her eyes were red, and the professional composure she had held so perfectly for 211 people for 93 minutes had finally completely come undone. Because it was safe now to let it. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hey, you did good. You kept that cabin together." "I did not do anything," Grace said, and her voice shook on every word. "We did everything," Ethan said, firmly. The same way he had said it to Daniel, because it was the truth, and he needed her to hear it the way Daniel had heard it. "The cabin was calm because you made it calm. The captain is alive because the doctor was there because you found him. I just flew the airplane. The airplane was the easy part." Grace laughed. A watery, broken sound. "That is the most insane thing anyone has ever said to me." Before Ethan could answer, a sound began. It started as a murmur, low, building, like a wave gathering itself before it breaks. He could hear it through the open forward door, coming from the cabin behind the curtain. Voices, Many voices, rising together, in a way that was not panic and was not just conversation. Something altogether different, something he had never heard on any flight he had ever been part of. Grace looked at the curtain. "They know," she said. "I told them who flew us down when I made the PA. I told them it was the passenger from row 5. "Grace," Ethan said, and his voice carried a warning. "They wanted to know," she said simply. "They had a right to know." And she reached past him and pulled the curtain aside. He did not want to go through it. He stood at the forward end of that aisle and felt 200 pairs of eyes settle on him simultaneously. And every atom of him said to step back, say nothing, let them all deplane, go home, forget him. The same way the world had always forgotten him the second the leather jacket came into view. But the sound coming through that curtain stopped him, because it was not jeering. It was not the nervous silence of people who had spent the whole flight avoiding him. It was applause, sustained, full-throated, 200 people, rising and rising until it filled the entire cabin and rattled off the overhead bins and hit him in the chest like a physical force. He stood in the doorway, and he let it wash over him. And the only thing he was sure of in that moment was that he was not going to cry. He had not cried since the night he made his daughter her promise. And he was not going to cry now, not here, not in front of 200 strangers. He was almost succeeding. Then he saw the woman from seat 5B. She was on her feet, 3 rows back, looking directly at him, with a face so open and raw and devastated with shame that it hit him harder than anything else that had happened in the last 90 minutes. Her arms hung at her sides, her purse was on the floor, her chin was trembling. "I am sorry," she said. She said it across the noise and the applause, loud enough that the people around her went quiet to hear her. And the whole forward cabin went quiet too. "I am so sorry I judged you. I never gave you a single chance." She stopped, pressed her lips together hard. "You saved my life. You saved every one of us. And I never even looked at you like a person." The applause had died completely. The cabin was listening now. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the purse on the floor. He thought about the moment she had lifted it into her lap. He thought about every single time in his life a version of that gesture had been directed at him. Every step back, every crossed arm, every whisper in a store or a restaurant or an airport. He felt all of it at once. And then he let all of it go. "Ma'am," he said, "when this plane lands, nobody goes home wondering if they did the right thing. That includes you." He held her gaze. "You go home. You hug whoever is waiting for you. We are good." The woman pressed her hand to her mouth and sat back down, and the woman beside her put an arm around her shoulders. Walter Hayes had not stood for the applause. His knees had stopped cooperating with standing ovations several years ago. But he was watching Ethan from seat 4C with those pale, sharp eyes. And when Ethan's gaze found the old pilot, Walter did something deliberate and slow. He came to attention in his seat, straightened his spine, squared his shoulders, and raised one thin, trembling hand. A salute. Ethan Walker stood a little straighter, and he returned it. He held it for 3 full seconds, to a man he had never met before today. A man who had seen the pilot inside the biker before anyone else had the eyes to look. A man who had said the words that got him out of that seat. The cabin watched the exchange in complete silence, feeling something pass between the 2 men that they could not quite name, but understood completely. The way you understand music you have never heard before. Then the moment ended. Passengers began gathering their bags. The ordinary, beautiful chaos of a deplaning aircraft took over, and Ethan stepped back out of the aisle to make room. Grace was beside him. "FAA is going to want to talk to you," she said quietly, "and the airline, and probably everybody else. I can see news cameras outside. They followed the emergency trucks." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Of course there are. You could go out the back." He shook his head. "I do not hide," he said. It came out more bluntly than he intended. But he heard in his own voice something that had not been there 5 years ago, something that had come back in the last 90 minutes, along with everything else. Not anymore. He pulled out his phone, old habit. He had kept it off since boarding, then no time. When it powered on, it buzzed, and kept buzzing. Missed calls, texts, numbers he did not recognize. There was a voicemail from a reporter, 2 of them. A text from an old Air Force buddy that said, "Walkie. Is that you? The flight, please call me." And underneath all of it, the one that mattered. A text from Lily. "Dad, why is there news saying something happened to your flight? Are you okay? Please answer. I am at the airport. Please answer, Dad." He called her before he finished reading it. It rang once. Dad. Her voice hit him like the landing had, sudden, real, physical. "Dad, oh my God. I saw it on the news. They said a plane declared an emergency, and then somebody said a passenger flew it, and I knew. I knew it was you before they said a single word." "I do not know how I knew, but I knew." "Baby." His own voice came out rougher than he wanted it to. "Hey, baby, I am okay. I am on the ground. Everybody is safe." Did you really? Dad, were you the one who flew it? A pause. One beat. Because the thing he had been dreading since the moment he stepped out of seat 5A had arrived, and he had not quite figured out how to say it. And his daughter deserved it straight. "Yeah," he said. "I was." Silence on the line. Then, "You broke your promise." 3 words, 13 years old. She put them together like a blade. "I did," Ethan said. "I broke it." Another silence, longer. Ethan waited. "Are you hurt?" Lily asked. "No, not a scratch. Is everyone okay on the plane?" "Everyone is okay. The captain is on his way to the hospital. But he is alive." A very long pause, and then Lily Walker, 13 years old, daughter of a biker and a ghost of a pilot, said something that unmade her father completely. "I am glad you broke it," she said. Her voice was small and fierce and absolutely certain. "I am so glad it, Dad, because if you did not, all those people—" She stopped. He could hear her breathing, hear her gathering herself. "You could not just sit there." "I know you could not. I would not want you to." A pause. "When are you coming?" He closed his eyes. "There is some stuff I have to deal with first. FAA, the airline, could be a few hours." "I will wait," she said immediately. "I am not leaving. I will wait as long as it takes." "Lily, Dad." Her voice went quiet. And absolutely steady. The voice of someone older than 13. "Go do what you have to do. I will be here. I have always been here." He stood with the phone pressed to his ear in the emptying galley of the airplane that had tried to kill 211 people and failed. And he felt the last piece of something come loose inside him, something he had been carrying for 5 years, something heavier than the leather jacket and the patch and all the miles. "I love you, baby girl," he said. "I love you too, Dad. Now go." He hung up. He stood still for 1 moment longer than he needed to. Then he squared the leather jacket on his shoulders, and he walked to the forward door, and he stepped out into whatever was waiting for him. The terminal was chaos. Airport security had tried to corral the news cameras to one side of the gate area. They had largely failed. Because the passengers of Flight 1487 were coming through the door in a steady stream, and every single one of them was talking, and the cameras were trying to get to all of them at once. Daniel was waiting just inside the gate. He looked better than he had in the cockpit. His color had come back. But he had the hollow look of someone who had come very close to something enormous and was still processing exactly how close. "How is the captain?" Ethan asked. "Alive," Daniel said. "Heading to surgery, but alive." Daniel nodded slowly. "FAA wants us both. They have got a room in the back. The airline lawyer is already in there." He paused. "You do not have to do this. You were a passenger. Technically, you can walk out that door and they cannot make you." "Daniel," Ethan said. I flew a commercial aircraft without a type rating, without a current medical certificate, without authorization from the airline or the FAA. I declared a mayday and violated weather minimums. They have a room with a lawyer in it because they need answers, and I am the one who needs to give them." He almost smiled. "I have never walked away from a debrief in my life. I am not starting now." Daniel stared at him. Then he said quietly, "You realize what you are walking into. They could pull whatever license you still have. We can worry about that when we are in the room," Ethan said. "But right now I need coffee. I need to know they are treating the captain right. And I need someone to tell me the airplane is okay." He glanced at Daniel. "Come on, walk me in." They walked in together, the biker and the first officer, side by side. And every head in the gate area turned to watch them pass. A child ran up, maybe 4 years old. A little boy who had been on the flight, and he grabbed Ethan's hand without a single word. Just grabbed it and held on for 3 full seconds while his mother caught up and gently pried him loose. She looked at Ethan with a face that said everything she could not put into words. He nodded at her. She nodded back. He kept walking. The FAA inspector's name was Carla Voss. Thin woman in her 50s, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, the expression of someone who had handled crises before, but perhaps not exactly this particular kind. She watched Ethan sit down without being invited, which seemed to surprise everyone in the room except her. "Mr. Walker, Miss Voss." Ethan said it because he had been in enough military briefings to know how to read a nameplate. Her eyebrow went up. "Before you ask, yes, I am aware of what I did today. Yes, I flew a commercial aircraft without the required certifications. Yes, I violated multiple FARs. And yes, I would do it again. So if you are looking for an apology, you are in the wrong room." He held her gaze. "But if you want the full debrief, every second of it, I am here, and I will give you everything." Henderson, the airline VP, leaned forward. "Mr. Walker, I want to be clear that the airline's position—" "Your airline's position," Ethan said without looking at him, "is that without me, 211 of your passengers and crew were in a wreckage field right now, instead of calling their families. So whatever position you walked in here with, I would adjust it before you say it out loud." A silence with weight to it. Carla Voss was looking at Ethan with something different in her face now. Something that had moved past the bureaucratic distance she had walked in wearing. She had been a pilot herself, before the desk. And she could read a debrief the way Walter Hayes could read a cabin. "Tell me about the fuel," she said. Ethan told her about the fuel. He told her about the crossfeed, the contamination, the way he had caught it when number 1 began to drop. He told her about the crosswind, the minimums, the one-shot approach. He told it in the flat, precise, minute-by-minute language of a cockpit debrief. No drama, no self-justification, just the facts, the decisions, and the reasons for the decisions, the way a man tells it when he knows that accuracy is the only currency worth spending. When he was done, Voss was quiet for a moment. "The crossfeed contamination," she said. "You caught it faster than most commercial crews would have." "I have had worse," Ethan said. "Military habit. Your instincts read the instruments differently." She made a note. "And the approach below minimums, 1 engine, crosswind at the top of the certified limit. You made the call to continue." "I made the call," Ethan said. "I made it because the alternate options were all worse, and the captain would not have survived the time needed to reach a clear field. And the engine was borderline enough that I was not willing to trust it for another 100 miles. He met her eyes. "I made the call I would have made in the Air Force in the same situation. The rule book says no. The situation said there is no other choice. In 12 years of combat flying, that math never gets easier, but the answer is always the same." Voss wrote something down. Henderson had gone very quiet. "The landing," Voss said. "What about it?" Dr. Anand's report. "The paramedics' report. Both say Captain Mercer experienced no additional cardiac stress during the landing. They are describing it as," she checked her notes, "imperceptible." "I had Daniel calling out the center line," Ethan said. "We had a good crew." Voss set her pen down. She looked at him for a long moment, then at Daniel. then back at Ethan. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I have been in this job for 19 years. I have debriefed a lot of flights. I have read a lot of incident reports, and I want to say something to you that will be off the record until I decide it is not." She glanced at the woman with the recorder, who paused it. "What you did today, the decision-making, the crew coordination, the fuel diagnosis, the below minimums approach, the landing, it is not what I expected to be walking into when they told me a biker from seat 5A flew a 737 into a storm with one engine." She paused. "I was wrong." The room was very still. "The FAA," she continued, "has a process for everything, including this. Your certificates are going to need review. The below minimums call is going to need to be examined by people who outrank me. There are questions about liability and authorization and a dozen other things that need to be managed. None of that changes what happened today, and none of it changes what I just told you." Then Voss did something Ethan had not expected. She picked her pen back up, wrote something on a small card, and slid it across the table to him. "That is my direct line," she said. "When this process runs its course, and it will run its course, that is not a threat, that is just how it works. You call me. Because a man who can do what you did today in a machine he has never flown under those conditions is the kind of man this industry should not lose." He looked at the card. Then he looked at her. "Thank you," he said. It came out simpler than he intended, and more honest. "I am not sure I want to go back to flying. I am not sure I am the same man I was before today. But thank you." "You do not have to be the same man," Voss said. "You just have to decide who you want to be next." It was Ethan thought the second time in one day someone had given him the exact answer he needed before he even knew he was asking the question. They kept him for another 2 hours. The lawyer talked, Henderson talked, more FAA representatives came in with more questions. Ethan answered everything, repeated nothing, corrected 2 factual errors in other people's accounts, and at no point raised his voice. Daniel sat beside him through most of it, and twice jumped in to confirm details. And once very quietly told the airline VP that if anyone in this room tried to make Ethan Walker the problem, Daniel was going to have a conversation with the press that the airline would not enjoy. Ethan had not asked him to say that. Daniel said it anyway. And when Ethan looked at him, the younger man shrugged with the elaborate casualness of someone who had decided in the last few hours exactly which kind of pilot he wanted to be. When it finally ended, Ethan stepped out of the operations room into the terminal. It was 4 in the afternoon, 3.5 hours after they had landed, and the gate area outside the room had something in it that had not been there before. Passengers, not rushing to catch a connection passengers. These were people who had been on Flight 1487, who had collected their bags and called their families and done everything they needed to do, and then come back. Maybe 60 or 70 of them, enough to fill the gate area. Sitting and standing and leaning against walls with the particular exhausted, relieved, slightly dazed look of people who have faced something enormous and come out the other side. When Ethan came through the door, they went quiet. He stopped walking. Nobody said anything. And then an older man in the back, heavyset, a grandfather type, with a Cardinals baseball cap, started clapping. Slowly at first, like a heartbeat. Then the people around him picked it up, then the people around them, and it built and built until the gate area filled with the sound of it. Not the shocked, reflexive applause from the airplane. Something considered. Deliberate. The applause of people who had had 3.5 hours to sit with what had happened, and decided to come back and give it. Ethan stood in the middle of it, and this time he did not fight the feeling, he just stood in it, and let it be real. A woman pressed to the crowd, middle-aged, dark coat. She had been somewhere in the back of the plane. She walked up and held out her hand. "My daughter is getting married next month," she said, very simply. "I need you to know that." He shook her hand. "Congratulations," he said. She nodded and stepped back. An older man, no words, just a handshake held a beat longer than necessary. The grip of a man who understood something and wanted Ethan to know he did. Then a young mother with a toddler on her hip, The toddler held out a drawing done in airport crayon on a napkin, wild and wobbly, but clearly an airplane. And clearly a stick figure in the cockpit. Underneath it, in the mother's handwriting, but in the child's voice, "The man who flew us home." Ethan took it carefully. He held it next to his heart for a moment, right over the pocket where his daughter's photo lived, and something in his chest turned over very quietly. "Tell her thank you," he said to the mother. "She has no idea what happened," the mother said, looking at the toddler with wet eyes. "She just saw you walk out of the cockpit, and she said, 'Mama, that man has wings on his jacket.'" She paused. "She is not wrong, is she?" Ethan looked down at the patch on his shoulder, the winged skull, the thing people had been seeing first for 5 years, seeing and fearing, using to write the whole story of a man they had never met. "Wings," he said, and almost smiled. "Yeah, I guess she is right." Then the crowd shifted, and Grace was there, off duty now, her uniform jacket exchanged for a sweater. Her composed, professional face finally completely down, and she put her arms around him the way a person holds on after something terrible has passed. Not gently, hard and certain, the way you hold on to proof. He stood there and let her. Because she had been the first person on the whole airplane who had looked at him like a person. And she had done it when it would have been easy not to. And that mattered more than she would ever know. "You good?" she asked into his shoulder. "Working on it," he said. She laughed and let go, and stepped back and looked at him with clear, steady eyes. "For what it is worth," she said, "I knew when you touched my sleeve. I already knew it was going to be okay." "How?" "Because scared men do not touch your sleeve like that," she said. "They grab, they pull, they demand. You touched my sleeve like a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and just needed someone to know he was ready to do it." She tilted her head. "I have been flying for 11 years, and I have never seen anything like what you did today. You kept 200 people from panicking," Ethan said. "Do not sell that short." "I told them the plane was fine," Grace said. "You made the plane fine. There was a difference." Old Walter Hayes was working his way through the crowd with his cane, slow and steady. People stepped aside for him with the automatic respect that age sometimes commands without asking for it. He reached Ethan and stopped. He looked up at him with those blue eyes that had seen 31 years of sky. "Told you," Walter said. "You did," Ethan said. "People do not lose years of training just because they stop wearing the uniform." The old man's jaw shifted. "How does it feel, being back in the seat?" Ethan thought about this. He thought about the moment the controls came alive under his hands, the way the airplane had talked to him, the way his body had remembered things his mind had not known he still knew. It felt like, he said slowly, coming home to a house you did not know you missed, until you were standing in the doorway. Walter nodded, and something settled in his old face. "Then do not stay away so long next time," he said. He patted Ethan's arm once, twice, the way you pat the arm of someone who has just proven something important, and turned and made his slow, careful way back through the crowd. Daniel was waiting at the edge of the gate area, standing slightly apart, hands in his pockets, the look of a man who has just had the defining day of his career, and is not yet sure whether he is supposed to feel proud or terrified or both. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hey. You need to go home. You have been awake since, 4 in the morning?" 3:30, Daniel said. He stared at the floor, then looked up. "I keep seeing it. The panel, the captain going down. That moment when the weather closed and I could not—" "That does not go away," Ethan said quietly. "Not the first time, not completely. But it changes. It becomes something you carry differently." He met the young pilot's eyes. "You did your job today, Daniel, under the worst possible conditions, with no backup, in an emergency nobody could have prepared you for. You held the airplane. You ran the checklists, you coordinated the radios, you called runway in sight at exactly the right second." He stuck out his hand. "Go home, hug whoever you have got. Come back to it when you are ready. And the next time you are in that seat and it gets hard, you remember today. You remember what you are made of. Daniel shook his hand and held on. Are you going to keep flying? He asked. Ethan looked at him. He thought about Carla Voss's card in his pocket. He thought about the feeling of the controls coming alive under his hands. He thought about the house he had not known he missed until he was standing in the doorway. I do not know yet, he said. Honestly, I've got a 13-year-old waiting for me at the other end of a flight I still have to get on, and I have got some things to figure out. He let go of Daniel's hand. But I am not ruling anything out. Daniel nodded. For what it is worth, he said, if I ever have an emergency again. He looked at Ethan. I want the biker from 5A. Ethan laughed, a real laugh, short and genuine, the first one that had come out of him all day. Let us hope you never need him, he said. He found a quiet seat at a different gate, away from the cameras still working the terminal, away from the lingering passengers slowly dispersing into the airport. He sat with his duffel between his feet, the napkin drawing tucked into his jacket beside his daughter's photograph, Carla Voss's card in his breast pocket, and he tried to figure out what he felt. It turned out to be complicated. There was relief, the enormous animal relief of something terrible ending without the worst outcome. The particular exhaustion that comes when your body has been running on pure adrenaline for 90 minutes, and the adrenaline has finally stopped. His hands, which had held steady on the controls through a crosswind approach in a storm below minimums, were trembling slightly now. That was normal. He knew it was normal. The body waits until you do not need it anymore, and then it falls apart just long enough to remind you it was scared the whole time. But underneath the relief, there was something harder to name. Something that had been sitting in his chest since the moment Carla Voss slid her card across the table and said, "You do not have to be the same man." Something that had cracked open when the controls came alive under his hands and the airplane spoke to him as though no time had passed at all. For 5 years, Ethan had been telling himself a story. The story was this. I was a pilot and I chose to stop. Stopping was the right choice. The man I was before is gone. He had told it so many times and so completely that he had almost believed it. He had poured it over his grief and his guilt and his loneliness like concrete, and built a life on top of the concrete. And it was a good life. He had no complaint against it. But today, in 93 minutes, the concrete had cracked, and what had come up through the cracks was not the ghost he had buried. It was something alive, something that had never stopped being alive. Just because he had stopped letting himself feel it. His phone buzzed, a name he had not expected. Marcus Webb. Captain Marcus Webb, now retired. His squadron commander at the base where Ethan's career had ended. The man who had signed the papers when Ethan walked away. The man who had known everything. The mission, the decision, the reason, the promise to Lily, and who had never once tried to talk him out of it. And who had shaken his hand at the gate and said, "You are the best I ever flew with, Walker. Do not waste it." 5 years of silence, and now a text. Saw the news, every word of it, the cross-feed call, the below minimums approach, the landing, a pause, then 3 dots. I always knew you would fly again. I did not know it would be like this. You okay, Ethan? Stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "Getting there. How did you know it was me before they released the name?" Marcus replied in under 10 seconds, "Because no one else I ever flew with would have caught a cross-feed contamination by feel, in an airplane they had never sat in before. That was you before you ever opened your mouth. Get home safe. Call me this week." Ethan set the phone face down on his knee and looked up at the ceiling. He was still looking at the ceiling when the gate area began to fill for his flight, and a voice beside him said quietly, "Is this seat taken?" He looked over. It was the woman from seat 5B. She was standing there with her carry-on and her coat and her purse. The purse she had clutched against him for 5 hours. The purse she had put in her lap when he sat down. The purse she had in the end left on the floor of the airplane when she got to her feet to say she was sorry. She looked like someone who had been crying and had stopped and was not entirely sure she was done. "I saw you sit down over here," she said. "I almost did not come." "I almost just got on my flight. But then I thought—" She stopped. "Is it taken, the seat number?" Ethan said. "Sit down." She sat. She put her purse in her lap, then caught herself, looked at it, and set it deliberately on the floor between her feet. The gesture was so conscious, so clearly an act of will, that Ethan had to look away for a second. "My name is Carol Briggs," she said. "I am a third-grade teacher. I am from Denver. I was going to Anchorage for my sister's 50th birthday." She folded her hands in her lap, like someone sitting in a confessional. "And I spent 4 hours on an airplane treating you like a threat. And then you saved my life. And I went to a hotel across the street. And I sat on the bed. And I thought about what kind of person I want to be. And then I came back." Ethan looked at her now, really looked. She was maybe 60, kind eyes that had been crying in them, silver hair that had come loose from where she had pinned it. She looked like somebody's mother, which she probably was, and like somebody's sister, which she definitely was. And she looked most of all like a person trying very hard to do something right after doing something wrong. "Carol." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it and keep it, because I mean it. When you pulled your purse up, I noticed. I always notice. I have been noticing that specific gesture from people I have never met for 5 years. And I will not tell you it did not sting. It always stings." He paused. "But the reason it always stings is because it is always about what you see, not who I am. And I have spent 5 years being quietly low-level angry about that, without ever knowing what to do with it." Carol Briggs was watching him very carefully. "Today changed something," Ethan said. "Not because of the applause or the thank yous or any of that, but because for 93 minutes nobody on that airplane cared what was on my jacket. They cared what was in my hands. And I had not felt that in a long time." He looked at her. "So what you did this afternoon, coming back to find me and say what you said, that means something. Not because I needed an apology, but because it takes something to do that. It takes a person who looks at themselves honestly, and that is rarer than you think." Carol Briggs pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. "I teach 8-year-olds, she said. "Every year I tell them, do not judge a book by its cover. Every single year. It is on a banner in my classroom." She let out a breath. "And then I sat down next to a man who frightened me because of how he looked, and I never, after 30 years of telling children not to do exactly that—" "You said hello today," Ethan said. "It is a little late." "Better late than the alternative," Ethan said. "Trust me, I have seen the alternative up close." She almost smiled, and then something shifted in her face, a thought crossing it like a shadow. "Your daughter," she said. "I heard you on the phone earlier. You said her name." "Lily, yeah. Is she okay? Does she know what happened to—" "She knows," Ethan said. "She was watching the news at the airport in Anchorage. She'd been watching for an hour before I could call her." "How old is she?" 13. Carol looked at him for a long moment. "She must be an incredible kid," she said, "to have a father like you." "She is better than I deserve," Ethan said simply. "She always has been." The gate agent's voice came over the PA. "Boarding announcement for Anchorage." Ethan picked up his bag. Carol Briggs stood at the same time, and she held out her hand. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, "for coming forward, for standing up, for—" Her voice caught. "For giving my sister her birthday." He held her hand for a moment. "Tell her happy 50th from me," he said. She laughed, a real one, with some life in it. She nodded and let go. He walked to the gate. The agent scanned his boarding pass, and Ethan Walker stepped onto the jetway of another airplane bound for Anchorage. And for 1 second, just one, He stood at the top of the jetway, where the smell of jet exhaust and recirculated air hit him all at once, and he felt the whole day settle over him like a coat. All of it, every second of it, from the moment he stepped onto Flight 1487 to this exact moment right here. He breathed it in. Then he walked down the jetway and found seat 1A and sat down. He slept for the first time since Denver. He did not dream. Or if he did not remember it. He woke when the wheels touched down in Anchorage, and for one disoriented second, he reached for the yoke. Then he realized where he was, what he was holding. The armrest. Just the armrest. And he let go. He was the last one off the plane. He came up the jetway and through the door and into the arrivals hall. And he did not have to look for her, because she found him first. She was through the barrier before the security guard could say a word about it. Running flat out the way only a 13-year-old can run. All legs and certainty and absolute zero doubt. And she hit him so hard he took a step back. His arms closed around her, and he just held on. She did not say anything for a long time. Neither did he. He could feel her shaking, just slightly. Just the tremor that is left after you have been terrified for 3 hours and then relieved. And then you can finally let the shaking out because the person you were terrified for is holding you. He tightened his arms and let her shake. "I watched it on the news," she said finally. Into his jacket. They had a reporter at Fairbanks. They showed the plane, the trucks, the storm. They said a passenger flew it. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I knew it was you before they said your name." "How?" "Because you are you, Dad." She looked at him steadily. Because when something goes wrong and someone needs help, you do not sit down, you stand up. You have always been like that, even when you were pretending not to be. He looked at his daughter, at the face he had been flying toward for 93 minutes, at the gap that was not there anymore, because she was 13 and her baby teeth were long gone. But her eyes were exactly the same eyes that had looked at him in a hospital hallway 5 years ago. "I broke it," he said. "I broke the promise. Dad." Her voice was patient and exasperated in the way that only a teenager talking to a parent can be. "I was 8 when you made that promise. I am 13 now. I am different." She looked at him steadily. "You made that promise because you thought keeping yourself safe was the most important thing you could do for me. But the most important thing you can do for me is be the person you actually are, not a person you made up just to stay safe." She reached up and put a hand against his chest, right over the pocket where the photograph lived. "I know what is in there. I know you carry that picture, and I know why." She held his gaze. "That picture is not asking you to be less. It never was." Ethan Walker stood in the Anchorage arrivals hall, in a worn leather jacket with a winged skull on the back, and he looked at his daughter, and he had nothing to say. Which was fine, because she was not done. "Are you going to fly again?" she asked. Direct, no preamble. 13 years old and asking the exact right question at the exact right time. He thought about Carla Voss's card. He thought about Marcus Webb's text. He thought about the way the airplane had spoken to him through his palms, the way the instruments had made sense in a way nothing else had in 5 years. He thought about the house you did not know you missed until you were standing in the doorway. "I do not know yet," he said. "Maybe." Lily tilted her head. "Good," she said. "Maybe is better than never." She took his hand the way she used to when she was small, and she started walking him toward the exit, and he let her lead. "One condition," she said, without looking at him. "What is that?" "If you go back to flying, you teach me." She glanced up. "Not now. When I am old enough, you teach me." "Deal," he said. Something moved through Ethan's chest that he recognized. He had felt it an hour ago on the flight deck of a plane he had brought out of a storm. He had felt it the first time he had ever soloed at 22 years old, and he had felt it the night Lily was born. It was the feeling of something beginning. "Deal," he said. She squeezed his hand once, hard, and then let go with the perfect casualness of a teenager who has gotten exactly what she wanted, and pulled out her phone with the other hand, already texting someone. Ethan walked beside her and watched her type, and thought not for the first time and not for the last that she was so far ahead of him it was almost funny. Outside the terminal, his phone rang, a number he did not recognize, area code Washington, D.C. He almost let it go to voicemail, then he answered. Walker, Mr. Walker. The voice on the other end was measured and deliberate, the voice of someone accustomed to choosing every single word with precision. My name is Richard Calloway. I am calling from the FAA's Office of Aviation Safety. I will not take much of your time tonight. I know what kind of day you have had. A pause. I have spent the last 4 hours on the phone with Carla Voss, with Pete Halverson at Anchorage Center, with Dr. Anand, and with First Officer Brooks. I also pulled your Air Force records, which are substantial. Mr. Calloway, Ethan said carefully, let me get to the point. What you did today was technically unauthorized. It also prevented what would almost certainly have been a catastrophic hull loss with major casualties. Those two facts create an interesting situation for us. Another pause. There is a process, not a common one, by which the FAA can, in cases of exceptional, demonstrated competency under emergency conditions, expedite the review and reinstatement of commercial certifications. Normally, this process takes months, sometimes years. Calloway's voice shifted slightly. I have been authorized to tell you that in your case, we would like to accelerate it considerably. Ethan had stopped walking. Lily, 3 steps ahead, turned and looked back. Reading his face with the accuracy of a daughter who had learned to read her father the way he had learned to read instruments. What does considerably mean? Ethan said. It means that if you want to fly again commercially, professionally, in any capacity, the doors are open. That is what it means. Carla will send you the details. She has been advocating for you loudly since she walked out of that debrief. Something in the voice that might have been amusement. She said, and I am quoting directly, "We would be idiots to lose this man again." I tend to agree with her. Ethan Walker stood outside the Anchorage terminal in the cold Alaska evening air, and he looked at his daughter looking at him. And he thought about everything the day had taken apart, and everything it had put back together. Tell Carla I will call her, he said. I will tell her, Calloway said. Welcome back, Captain Walker. The line went quiet. Ethan stood for a moment with the phone at his side. Lily waited. She had all the patience in the world when she needed to. This girl. Good call, she asked. Interesting call, Ethan said. Are you going to tell me what it was? He looked at her. He thought about all the ways to say it carefully, slowly, with footnotes and conditions and appropriate uncertainty. Then he decided that his daughter had earned a straight answer, and he gave her one. The government wants to give me my wings back, he said. Lily Walker did not scream. She did not jump. She was 13, not 8, and she handled things with the quiet dignity of someone who had already decided she knew this was coming before it arrived. She just looked at him for a long, clear moment. And then she said, Okay. Okay, he repeated. That is all. What do you want me to say? I told you maybe it was better than never. She tilted her head. Are you going to take it? He looked up at the Alaska sky, dark and vast and full of stars that pilots learn to navigate by before they ever touch a single control. He thought about the last 9 hours. He thought about Mr. Hayes, who saw the pilot and the biker before anyone else had the eyes to look. He thought about Daniel Brooks, who had trusted a stranger with his life and the lives of 200 souls. He thought about Grace Okafor, who had smiled at him when no one else would. He thought about Carla Voss, who had slid a card across a table and asked who he wanted to be next. He thought about Captain Mercer, who had smiled the faintest, most exhausted smile and said, Good landing, before they wheeled him away. And he thought about what he had told Daniel when it was over. Nobody does this alone. Nobody ever did. He had thought for a long time that the hardest thing about being who he was, the biker, the outlaw, the man the world looked at and stepped away from, was the loneliness of being misread. But the harder thing, the thing today had cracked wide open, was that he had participated in his own disappearance. He had taken the leather jacket and used it the same way everyone else did, as a reason to not be known. He had hidden Captain Walker inside the Hells Angels patch and called it a choice and called it a promise, and never quite admitted to himself that what it really was fear. Fear that if he climbed back into a cockpit, he would lose something again. Fear that the part of him that could fly was also the part that could get killed. Fear that you could not be a pilot and a father, a man of action and a man of presence, the person his daughter needed and the person he actually was. Today had answered that fear, completely, definitively, in the most undeniable way possible. He had been both. He had been all of it at once, the biker and the captain, the father and the pilot, the man who made a promise and the man who broke it, for the right reasons, and the man who came home anyway. He had been all of it at the same time, and the airplane had landed, and everyone had come home. He looked down at Lily. "Yeah," he said, "I am going to take it." She nodded once, the small, certain nod of someone filing away a fact they already knew. Then she bumped his shoulder with hers. "Good. Now can we go get food? I have been at this airport for 6 hours and all they have is bad pretzels." He laughed, that same short, genuine laugh, and it came easier this time. "Yeah," he said, "let us go get food." They walked to his truck. The Harley was back home. He had flown out, so it was the truck tonight. Lily climbed into the passenger seat and immediately connected her phone to the Bluetooth and put on music he did not recognize. He did not complain. Ethan sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. He reached into his jacket. He took out the photograph. Gap-toothed grin, crayon letters, "My dad." And he looked at it one more time. Then he looked at the girl in the passenger seat. 5 years older than the drawing, infinitely more complicated, and more herself. Humming along to something he could not identify. Scrolling through her phone with the complete self-possession of someone who has decided the crisis is over and it is time to eat. He put the photograph in the glove box, not because he was done with it, but because the girl in the photo was sitting right next to him now, and she did not need to travel in his pocket anymore. He started the engine. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Washington. It was formal, official, full of the language that government documents use when they are trying to say something simple in the most complicated way possible. But underneath all of it, the meaning was clear. His commercial pilot certificate had been reviewed, reinstated, and upgraded. His medical had been fast-tracked and approved. His combat flight hours had been recertified by the FAA in a process that Carla Voss had apparently argued for with the energy of someone who takes losing good pilots very personally. At the bottom of the letter in the signature block was a handwritten note in the margin. 3 words, in a hand he recognized from a card slid across a conference table. "You already knew." He read it twice. Then he folded the letter and put it in the same glove box as the photograph. And he drove to the chapter house where his brothers were waiting. He walked in the leather jacket. Someone handed him a cup of coffee. He sat down. And he was exactly where he was supposed to be. That weekend, he rode the Harley up the highway along the coast, the way he always did when he needed to think. He stopped at the overlook where the road bends out toward the inlet and the sky goes on forever. He cut the engine. He sat on the bike, and he looked up. A commercial airliner crossed overhead, high and bright, catching the last of the afternoon sun on its wings, drawing a clean white contrail across the blue. He watched it until it was gone. Then he pulled out his phone and called Marcus Webb. "I am back," and he said when the man answered. "I know," Marcus Webb said. "I have been waiting for you to figure that out for 5 years. You could have told me." "Would not have done any good," Marcus said. "A man like you has to find it himself. You know that. You have always known that." He did know it. He ended the call and sat for a moment longer on the overlook, engine quiet, the wind off the inlet cold and clean against his face. and he thought about everything a leather jacket can hide, and everything it cannot. He thought about a little girl who had grown into someone braver than he had known how to be. He thought about a promise that he had broken and kept at the same time, because some promises are bigger than the words you use to make them. He thought about seat 5A, and the silence that had fallen over a cabin when a biker stood up. He thought about the sound, the long, full human sound of 200 people cheering in a gate area in Fairbanks for a man they had spent a whole flight being afraid of. He thought about Carla Voss's 3 words, "You already knew." He had always known. He had just needed 93 minutes. A failing engine, a dying captain, a first officer who trusted him with everything, an old pilot who saw through a leather jacket straight to the wings underneath, and a 13-year-old girl who told him the truth about himself more clearly than anyone ever had. He had needed all of that, just to admit what he already knew. He was a pilot. He had always been a pilot, and a father, and a brother, and a man who, when the world needed him to stand up, stood up. Those things had never been in conflict. He had just been too afraid to let them all be true at the same time. Ethan Walker put on his helmet, started the engine, and pointed the Harley toward home, toward Lily, toward whatever came next, toward the life that had been waiting for him all along on the other side of the fear he had been calling a promise. The biker in seat 5A had walked onto a plane as one man and walked off it as another. Not a different man, not a new man, not the ghost of a captain or the shadow of a soldier or some version of himself built out of leather and silence. Just the whole man. Finally, all at once, without apology. And that was more than enough.